Hello YouTube, Dave here again. A couple years ago I started a series of videos with some collecting tips, just some things that I found worked for me as I was building up my collection, and just some general advice, some really common sense stuff that was aimed towards people looking to get into tabletop RPG collecting, or a lot of, I think the advice can really apply to any form of collecting whatsoever. But recently, I've sort of gotten into a new aspect of collecting that I never really discussed before, or at least not in great detail. And obviously, as the title dictates, today I want to do or discuss the idea of pocket editions of various RPG books. Now, this isn't a new concept, although my exposure to it is relatively recent. But it is worth noting that as far back as first edition AD&D, there were several books that were re-released as these tiny, and when I say pocket size, for those ones, they were like literally pocket size. You could fit them in like your front shirt pocket. I never owned any of these. I would actually love to get one at some point. It's not something I necessarily want to get a whole set of, and I don't even know how many of them were released. But the one that I remember seeing the most of was always the Advanced AD&D Monster Manual 2 for first edition AD&D. And like I said, these things were super small. Like, they were probably, I would say, about the size of this camera in comparison to the actual physical book. And I don't know, again, how widespread these were, if they were just released in certain markets, but they are probably the oldest examples of a pocket edition that I can think of. Again, I don't have any, I can't speak too much to them, and I don't know, I'm assuming that they're complete, but that's just a little bit of a background, I guess, as to how long this concept has sort of been going on for. My introduction to sort of the pocket-sized RPG books actually started back in 2010 with the Dmd Essentials line. Now, this is one of my favorite sets of role-playing rules that I've ever owned. I absolutely loved this concept, and this was something that I would have been completely okay with if this was the way that they decided to go about it going forward. The thing about these pocket-sized books is that they are typically cheaper to produce, meaning that they're cheaper for the consumer, which is great. They also take up less room if you're someone who, like me, is really desperately running out of room, or just someone who doesn't have a lot of room to store stuff in the first place. So when these books first came out, this was something that I absolutely I just loved it, and this is actually what got me into the 4th edition rule set. But that's not what I'm here to discuss today. This is just my earliest introduction to this kind of product, really. So we have here, this is one aimed at players. There was a second one aimed towards players as well, with slightly different races and classes. And the great thing about this particular subset is that you didn't need to have both of them if you didn't want to. Now, if you wanted the more standard races, the more typical, atypical races that you would see, or not, I don't think atypical is the right word, it's late at night, but the typical races that you would normally see in these fantasy books, then Heroes of the Fallen Lands would be the one that you would want. It also has your more traditional classes of Cleric, Fighter, Rogue, and Wizard, but if you wanted something different, and you wanted to have a non-conventional party made up of non-conventional race-class combinations, then you could get just Heroes of the Fallen Kingdoms, and that would work perfectly fine for you. You didn't need both of these books. You could just do everything that you wanted to do with one or another, just depending on what it was that you were looking for. But that was, again, I think one of the beautiful things about it is that they were designed in such a way that you didn't need to have them both. And that's the one reason why the human race actually is printed in both of these books, because humans are, again, they're super prevalent. So they were reprinted in this book from this one, in case you didn't want this one and you only wanted this one. So I think that was a really clever design. And again, the prices were $23.95, so they were cheaper than the regular hardcover books, which would be around $50 to $60 at that point in time. They also released the Rules Compendium, which was just sort of a more in-depth explanation of how the rules and combat system really worked. There was some general stuff in these books. There was some stuff in the Dungeon Master's kit as well, but this was the more thoroughly expanded on or explored version of that. And this was, like I said, it was a great set. And this was what got me into initially into really liking this concept. However, once these books came out and the 2 box sets came out, the Dungeon Master's Kit, which I've done a video on, and the Monster Vault, which I haven't done a video on yet, but will at some point in the near future, they went back to the hardcovers. And I have to admit, I was honestly a little bit disappointed because I just really loved these books, and I loved the way that they looked. I loved the cover design. I just loved the way they looked on shelves. So I was honestly a little bit disappointed when they went back to the hardcovers. But this was actually an example of a current system being released in the format, which is great if that's the way that a company chooses to, the direction that they choose to go into. But that's not necessarily the best way to get into collecting or to building in a collection. So the thing that I really wanted to focus on in this video is the concept of filling out your collections using, again, pocket editions. The most recent version of a pocket edition that I picked up, and this is actually one of the earliest ones that I picked up at the same time. This is the Tome of Beasts. It's a 5e compatible book, but this is the pocket edition. This is done by Kobold Press. And the original Tome of Beasts was a book that I really wanted to pick up, but I just didn't want to. The price was just a little bit too high for what I was willing to pay for what's essentially a third-party product. However, this pocket edition was actually pretty decently priced. It's $21.99 US. I think it rounded up being around $25 or $26 Canadian plus tax. But the hardcover was in like the $50 range. So again, Canadian, based off of the website that I was looking at anyway. But this was something that as soon as I saw it, I didn't hesitate. I immediately picked it up, and it's pretty cool. And it's an interesting collection of creatures. I will say that I feel like perhaps they went about making too many things sound like completely unique, like that kind of thing. But overall, it's a really good book, and this was something that it's not really that old a product either, but it's just a way of reintroducing this to people that may not have picked it up around the first time that it came out. So this came out in 2016, but it's for a current product, which is really, really cool. So I was really happy to see this, and I would love to see more of these. So the main one that I really want to look at here today, though, is going back to first edition Pathfinder. So I've had people ask me before if I had plans on collecting first edition Pathfinder products. At the time, in fact even currently, the only hardcover Pathfinder first edition book that I have is the core rulebook, and I always had said no to questions of if I wanted to go back and collect first edition Pathfinder stuff, because I'm already running out of room as it is, and hardcovers are expensive. And I don't mind used books, but I prefer to get new if possible, simply because, with the new ones, you're less likely to come across ones that have been mistreated or just maybe, came from a household that was that had smoke or had other things that can affect the book. So, it's not that, again, that used books are by any means bad, and it's not that I don't have a bunch of used books in my collection, because I certainly do. But I just wasn't interested in going back and getting used books for Pathfinder from 1E. Again, the biggest thing was honestly just the amount of space that they take up, and the amount of space that I just don't have for these things to be to be taken up at this point in time. Considering that I don't really have any intentions on necessarily running first edition Pathfinder. At this point, my interest in the first edition stuff is just more for the purposes of doing videos. At first, honestly, the only forms of the pocket books or pocket editions that I was looking at getting were things like this, and this is Rise of the Rise of the Rune Lords. Did I mention that's late and words are hard? So this is a reprint of the anniversary edition, and again, I should mention with these pocket editions, they reprint everything in their entirety. There's nothing cut, there's nothing altered from what I can understand. The only thing that they may have done was incorporate some errata, but I don't even think that they've necessarily done that. And they actually even maintain the same page count, because I looked on online for one of the product listings, and they had the hardcover and the pocket editions listed in the same section. So you could click on one or the other and view the details, and the page count was the exact same for both of them. The one downside, I would have to say, and the only downside I can really think of, is that as a result of them shrinking this down to keep everything the same size, the text is a little small, and I'm not getting any younger, so this can be a little bit tougher on the eyes than it may have been a few years ago. But that's honestly a minor thing, and I mean, I need to get my eyes checked for a while anyway. But again, this is just really, really great stuff. So Rise of the Rune Lords I wanted to get because this was the first Pathfinder first edition, or this is the first Pathfinder campaign path, or adventure path. In fact, the original version of Rise of the Rune Lords was an adventure path that predated the Pathfinder rule set. The Pathfinder brand existed, but the actual standalone game didn't. This was in the era between the ending of the Dungeon Magazine printed version and the release of the actual Pathfinder rules, and there was about a 2-year gap sort of in between that. But Paizo still put stuff out in the meantime. It's just it was for 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons. This anniversary edition is actually updated for the Pathfinder first edition rules after they'd come out. So this was the 5-year anniversary edition, and again, it's been shrunk down into just the pocket version. But again, everything's here. And in May, I'm really looking forward to getting the Curse of the Crimson Throne. So that's something that I am really looking forward to getting as well, because I want to get some of these older adventures, because even if I don't use the rule set, there is inspiration that I can take from the adventures themselves, and they probably won't be the hardest things in the world to convert from one edition to the other, especially if they're using like just monsters that they have available in their bestiaries. So that shouldn't be too much of a problem. But that was basically how I wanted to start my Pathfinder first edition collection, was just to get these adventure compilations. However, I have to admit I do find myself starting to develop quite a bit of fondness for these. And again, this is a cheaper alternative to the hardcovers, especially something like this, where the hardcover is probably a decently sought after item. They're usually about half the price that you would probably pay for a regular priced hardcover today. So this one, and this is a thicker book, like this is over 400 pages. So this was $29.99 US, and honestly, the Canadian price was only, I think, $5 more. So it probably wasn't sticking too closely to the conversion rate, which I'm totally okay with, because it worked out well for me. But yeah, just really, really love that. And I decided to pick up a couple more. The first one is actually a little bit of a funny story, because I recently did an update video talking about my Through the Ages series, which I will be getting back to in the next couple of days. The next time I go to record videos, that Barbarian Pathfinder video will be the one that I record. And in that video, in the update video, I had mentioned that I had ordered the Advanced Player's Guide for First Edition Pathfinder, because it had some alternate barbarian features, but it was also where the Alchemist first appeared, and I was considering doing a Through the Ages on the Pathfinder Alchemist. I actually mentioned in that video that I was aware of the Advanced Class Guide, but wasn't interested in getting it, at least at that point in time. Well, my order arrived, and I was a little bit surprised to see that the book that was in there was actually the Advanced Class Guide. And I kind of scratched my head and I looked at the original order, and this is the one that was listed on that order. And I was trying to figure out what had happened, but then I remembered that I actually originally had 3 books in my cart, and I could only afford 2 of them, and I was trying to figure out which 2 were of those 3 options I was going to go with. I had the Advanced Class Guide, the Advanced Player's Guide, and then I had the Game Mastery Guide for First Edition Pathfinder. And the determining factor was the fact that when I went back to their product listings, the Game Mastery Guide suddenly only had 1 left in stock. A few days before, when I first put the items in my cart, before I had the funds to get them, or before I decided what I was going to do with the limited funds that I had to get them, that warning wasn't there. They may have said, like, there's only 5 left in stock or something like that, and that number had been relatively stable because this was something that I'd sort of been looking at on and off for the last couple of months. But when I went just a few days ago, I guess a couple weeks ago at the time that I'm recording this, I checked the Game Mastery Guide, and suddenly it said there's only 1 left in stock. So I was like, okay, crap, that has to be one of the ones that I get then, because I wanted to get this book, and I didn't know how likely it would be that they would get a restock, or how long it would take for them to get a restock of it. So that was one that I knew I was going to put in there. So the thing is, I had to remove one of them, and it was a tie between the Advanced Player's Guide and the Advanced Class Guide, and I did this early in the morning. I hadn't had my coffee yet, and I accidentally removed the wrong one. The covers looked kind of similar enough in the little tiny thumbnails, because I want to say that they're fighting a green dragon in the Advanced Player's Guide, but it's a happy accident, I guess, because now, like, at the time that I ordered it, I thought I only had, enough funds to get 2 of them. But I actually ended up getting GST from the government, which I hadn't been getting for a couple of years now, so I wasn't expecting it. So when I went to check my account to make sure that I had enough for both the books after I placed the order, because I could transfer from another account, the difference if necessary, that I just suddenly had a whole bunch more than I was expecting. So now I do have a copy of the Advanced Player's Guide, and I made sure it was the Advanced Player's Guide, ordered, and it will hopefully ship within the next day or so. And I also took advantage of the opportunity to order something else, but that's a whole other subject. So anyway, the thing, like I said, about these videos, or about these products, is it's a fantastic way to build up a collection, especially with Paizo really keeping up with these and putting these out. I should mention that they also are listing, or have mentioned on a schedule of things to come out, that near the end of the summer, I think, or August or September, they're actually going to be releasing a pocket edition of the Starfinder core rulebook. So that'll be really cool to see as well, because that's actually a current product. But again, for people that may want to get into it but don't want to spend the money for the hardcover, these pocket editions are usually significantly cheaper. And I think that these are a great way to fill out your collection, and I wish more companies would do this sort of thing, especially with their older releases. For 5th edition D&D, I think it'd be great if they went back and re-released stuff like the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, or the Prince of the Apocalypse, Curse of Strahd, just to re-release some of those older adventures in those pocket editions and make them a little bit cheaper. Hell, even do the core rulebooks, because at this point it's been almost 6 years. So it's not going to kill their business if they re-release these as the pocket versions, and honestly, if they did that with their core rulebooks, I would get it. And the reason for that is because they're easier. It's way too late at night for that to be going on. It's way easier to carry around these pocket books, these pocket editions, than it is the full-size hardcover. So I would honestly make pretty good use of the core rulebooks if they redid those. But Wizards of the Coast, probably not going to be their thing. which is a shame because when it was their thing, I think they did a really great job with it. But I do know, like Paizo, for example, is keeping on top of these pocket editions, and they're just a great way to, again, build out your collection. It's a great way to build your collection on a budget because these are cheaper. This one was, again, a more expensive book just because of how many pages it was, but these ones here are only $19.99 US. As opposed to $29.99 US. So these were a lot cheaper, and this was only about a $24 book for me, Canadian. So again, a much cheaper alternative than trying to get the original hardcovers, and they look nice. They take up less space on your shelf, so if you have limited room, you can, in theory, fit more of these on your shelf than you could otherwise with the hardcovers. So I just think that there's a lot of great potential in these types of products, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to getting more of and to build out my collection that way. And yeah, I honestly intend to get the Starfinder Core Rulebook Pocket Edition as well once it comes out, if it does release, and as long as it's not one of those things that is listed as an idea and then changes, because that can happen. Obviously, we're looking at several months down the line, so things can change. But if they do release that, I will absolutely be picking that up because I just, again, it'd be a lot easier to carry these smaller books to my local game store than have a backpack full of hardcovers and a compressed spinal cord. So anyway, let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think of pocket versions of role-playing books? Do you have it in your collection? Does your collection consist primarily of pocket editions? Because for my first edition Pathfinder stuff, that is absolutely the way that it's going to go. And I'm even considering getting the core rulebook one just to have, and maybe even selling or doing something with the hardcover. It's hard to say. I haven't committed to anything like that yet, but I do love these, and I do want to build out a pretty decent collection of these pocket editions. So again, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to hearing about some of the things that you have in your collection along these lines. And I hope for people that are looking to get into collecting some of these things, especially trying to go back and collect first edition Pathfinder, I hope that this helped sort of provide at least an alternative to like eBay or used books or things like that. So anyway, again, thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Take care.